We are really thrilled to be here with so many great physicians, and these are all doctors who you're going to hear from who are very much opposed to this proposed Constitutional Amendment 4 that's going to be on your ballot when you go to vote. And what I tell people is, when these things show up on the ballot like this that are funded by the special interest groups, and both Amendments 3 and 4 are that, with tens of millions of dollars that have poured in from out of state, your default should be no, right? That should be the default. They should really have to convince you why doing what they're spending tens of millions of dollars is somehow good to amend onto Florida's Constitution. And these are things you don't get a mulligan on. Once it's in the Constitution, there really is no going back. I mean, practically speaking, you're not going to be able to fix any problems that will inevitably come out when you have these types of things. And so just seeing it from that perspective, just as a voter, I'm always very skeptical when they're trying to shove this stuff down your throat, spending all this money, telling you all this. And so that's just generally speaking how you do it. Amendment 4 should be even more cause for skepticism, because if you read it, they don't define any of the terms that they're using in the amendment. And that's by design, because if you think about it, if you're going to do we should all agree on what the hell we're voting on, and nobody can agree on what you're voting on. These amendments are supposed to be clear. They're not supposed to be deceptive or misleading. And if they are, then the Supreme Court, when they review it, is not supposed to put it on the ballot. And it was a 4-3 decision to put it on. So that was a big mistake. And so now you have this ill-defined, and they did that for a reason, because the whole idea is to try to jam this through with a blizzard of lies. The whole thing is built on fraud. It's built on fraud in a lot of the petitions that were allegedly signed. They've already uncovered a lot of fraud on that. And then to have this language that is not defined, you would never draft a piece of legislation without knowing what you're doing. But they did that on purpose, because these are all phrases that have been poll tested to try to create this impression with voters that somehow this is kind of an innocuous thing. And it really is anything but that. Now, it's important to kind of talk about and unpack what is actually in this amendment, because the people that are spending tens of millions of dollars, they're not talking about what's in their own amendment. They're not talking about any of that. They're just simply telling lies about Florida policies and law, and they are all lies. Everything you're seeing on the TV, that has just been their way to do it, to try to say you can't get health care, this, that, there's no exception for rape. It's all a bunch of lies, but that is part and parcel for this, which is a very deceptive amendment, and the whole thing is based on deceit. So it's important to say they don't want to talk about their own amendment. They want to basically focus on false things in Florida and say that should be a reason why you would vote for something like this. So what exactly would the amendment do? I think it's the first amendment in the history of Florida, if it were to pass, that would actually take away people's rights, because this eliminates the right for parents to consent for a minor to have an abortion. That's current law in Florida, that you have parental consent. And honestly, that is not anything that is unusual with respect to abortion. You can't prescribe, if you're a physician, you can't prescribe a Tylenol to a minor without the parent's consent. Anything that you would do, you would need the parent's consent. And I think most parents, that's how it should be. If a parent finds out they're getting stuff done without even knowing or consenting, that's not acceptable. Now, there's bait and switch on this provision too, because what it says on the ballot was there's nothing in the amendment that will prohibit notification of parents about a minor having an abortion. That is not the same as consent. They are rolling back consent and saying just telling a parent that there's an abortion is somehow the same as making the parent as having them have decision-making power. So they are taking away your rights as parents on this one thing. So, and look, I think as a parent, like if they're going to give you prescription medication, Tylenol, all that stuff, of course the parent should consent across the board. How is it appropriate that you would take parental consent away from abortion, which is a very serious thing to be happening, and take that away from parents? And so that is wrong, but it takes away rights of parents. And in Florida, we've worked hard to support the rights of parents across the board, on education, on all these different things that are so important. So there is a bait and switch on the way it was written. Notification is not consent, and you will absolutely have minors that undergo abortion without the parents consenting to it if this amendment passes, and that obviously is not good for parents. And maybe even more crazy than that is this amendment, you got to read it very carefully, it displaces the role of physicians when it comes to abortion. Now, look, there's people who may not be pro-life, but there's a lot of people that say, you know, they don't like abortion, they think it should be rare, but ultimately they don't support policies that would provide protection for unborn because they say it should be a decision that the mother makes in consultation with the doctor. And you hear that all the time from folks who may not subscribe to a pro-life perspective. And I understand that, and I respect that, but just understand what they're doing on this amendment. They are substituting, and in Florida law, you have to be a licensed physician with respect to abortion. You're not allowed to be involved to do it unless you're a licensed physician. And I think that's probably what the law is in pretty much every state in the country. This amendment substitutes, instead of physician, health care provider. Well, understand, there's a lot of health care providers that are not medical doctors. And not only that, there are a lot of medical doctors that may not be properly trained to be involved in this as well. So anyone who can claim to be a health care provider, which would be, I mean, honestly, a clerk at Planned Parenthood is technically a health care provider if they are involved in this. So you are really making a radical change in how this is appropriate. And I just don't see how that could possibly end well. And what will happen with this, and why this is especially dangerous for Florida, is, you know, we live in a part of the country in the southeast which generally has pro-life legislation and pro-life protections in place. You know, Georgia, from Texas to Georgia, South Carolina, all those places. So what the abortion industry will do, they want to make money off this, okay? That's why they're doing this. They want to make money off this. And so what you will see is you will see recruiting of people from those other states to come to have abortions in Florida. And you're going to have some of these clinics that pop up which are not going to have the type of safety and regulatory that is required under current Florida law. And you will have non-physicians that are going to be leading this charge. So why would you want to displace the role of a doctor, a medically trained doctor in this? That is a crazy change. That is a change that whether you don't like abortion, and whether even if you are very much in favor of abortion, and there's some people, I think, unfortunately, who want to see more abortions. And this amendment, by the way, would lead to an extra 40,000 abortions a year in the state of Florida. We already have thousands a month that take place under our current heartbeat bill. This would be way more than that, and would be bringing in people from other states, and we would become this major abortion tourist destination, which is not what we want for our state. But even people that are very pro, I don't think very many of them could justify substituting in place of a physician any health care provider. And once it's in the Constitution, you cannot legislate against it. I hear some people talk about some of these amendments. Oh, the legislature will fix it. First of all, I mean, do you want to honestly think that's going to happen? That's not the way typically these things work, but you can't legislate against it. So anybody who claims to be a health care provider would be able to cite this provision in the Constitution, if it passes, and say that they are empowered to not just to do abortion. Under this amendment, they can green light an abortion up to the moment of birth, according to this. That is just nuts. And I think most people think it's nuts. Now, if you read the amendment and you're filling out your ballot, you just see that, that may not be something that immediately springs to mind, but that is a radical departure from anything anyone has ever thought appropriate on the pro-life side, on the abortion side. Nobody has thought that displacing physicians is a good thing to do. The other thing this amendment would ultimately lead to is a hit against taxpayers. Doesn't say anything about tax dollars per se in the amendment, but what happened in Michigan, the same groups that passed a somewhat similar amendment there, after it was enacted, they went into court and they sued and said it violates the Constitution not to have taxpayers funding it, therefore they're entitled to have taxpayers fund the abortions. And you know what? Those groups will do the exact same thing here in the state of Florida. And all they got to do is find a left-wing judge to agree with them. So that will happen. This will likely lead to taxpayer funding of abortion. And again, there's people that are pro-life, there's people that are not. I don't think very many people think this is appropriate for taxpayers to be funding it. You have a 0% chance of that happening if Amendment 4 fails. If it passes, you are absolutely going to see that push run through the courts where they are going to demand that taxpayers fund these abortions. And again, these abortions can go all the way up to the moment of birth the way this amendment is written. You also look at terms like viability. They don't define viability. They say nothing can prohibit, restrict, delay, which basically wipes off all these pro-life protections. And it's not just about gestational limits, like when there's a detectable heartbeat, you protect the unborn. There's so many other things that go into creating a culture of life, to have safety, to have all these different things. Those would all be wiped away, but they don't define viability. And what does that mean? A lot of people don't. The way they would do it, and the way the people proposing this would do it, and they will litigate in court on this, they think it's basically past 6 months. So you would be able, if this passed, to have 6 months in the womb, fully formed baby, heartbeat, can feel pain, sucking its thumb. You see it on the ultrasound. You see the face. And that would be able to be snuffed out for no reason whatsoever. That would be in the Constitution of the state of Florida if this passed. And so I don't think most people think it's appropriate at 6 months to be able, for just no reason at all, to do an abortion. But that would be in law, in our Constitution, basically forever in the state of Florida. They didn't want to define that because they know that a lot of people would recoil from it. Because when you start talking about 6 months, you're talking about the unborn child has really excruciating pain during these abortions. Most of the abortions are dismembering the baby, pulling limb from limb. It's really grotesque. But you got to go into this eyes wide open. If you're someone that's going to vote, just know what you're voting for. It may not be comfortable to hear. People want to kind of just avert their eyes. But when you start talking about putting something in the Constitution, I think people should know the truth about what is at stake here. Now, it's important to flag this issue of viability. They don't define it, and the way they would define it, and will, if it passes, would be really significant, and I think would be far beyond what most people in Florida would think appropriate. But in some ways, if you read the way the amendment's written, they create even an exception to that effectively swallows the rule, because they say any healthcare provider can greenlight an abortion up until the moment of birth to, quote, protect the patient's health. Now in Florida, our laws provide exceptions for the life and health of the mother, but the health is defined in ways that it can't just be something that you have a headache or you're having some mental health issue, because it's tough There's anytime anyone gives birth, it's not easy. I mean, we have 3 kids. I could tell you, my wife going through, it's not easy. There's going to be things that can come up, but to say that you're not going to define that, whatever some non-physician thinks counts, would then green light no limits at all the way up until the moment of birth. And people will say that late-term abortions do not happen. That is false. It's rare. There's no question it's rare. Most abortions occur, within 6 or 8 weeks, but they do occur. And this is not just me saying this. I mean, you read left-wing pro-abortion sources have acknowledged most late-term abortions are purely elective. They are not for any overriding life or health, which is obviously covered under Florida law. And so what this would do, because they don't define it, would allow a non-physician to greenlight an abortion up until the moment of birth for virtually any reason. Is that something that is appropriate? I think everybody agrees there's got to be some limit at some point. And you can disagree on that. You can argue if you want a detectable heartbeat be the limit, if you want when the baby can feel pain, whatever is your position, there's got to be some limit. And this Amendment 4, the way it's deceptively crafted, would effectively mean no limits. And there'd be no way to enforce any limits. And that would make Florida one of the most extreme abortion jurisdictions, not just in America, but anywhere in the civilized world. That's not something that we would want to see for this. Now, because of the way it's written, it says you can't, delay, do anything regarding abortion. And that means a lot of the health and safety regulations that are in place would basically be tossed out the window, because if you have to comply with regulations, if you have to comply with some of the things, then it is necessarily going to provide some delay because you have to comply. So licensing and sanitation requirements would be out the window. Requiring admitting privileges and proximity requirements for abortions to be performed near a hospital by an admitted physician so that immediate life-saving treatment can be performed if something goes wrong would be out the window. Medical screening requirements, waiting periods, in-person counseling, informed consent literature, ultrasounds, all these things that are in place to support the health and safety of both the mother and the unborn child would be off the table. And I think what may happen is that in Florida, if a baby survives an abortion, there's a responsibility to provide life-saving care for the baby, and that's how it should be. It's unclear whether that would still be the case if Amendment 4 passes. What I can tell you, and you see it with Waltz in Minnesota, they had law in place that said if a baby survives an abortion attempt and is born alive, you have to provide life-saving treatment, as you would normally, right? He signed legislation repealing that so that there is no duty to care for a baby that survives a botched abortion attempt. And I know people that have survived abortion attempts. They've lived to talk about it. To just say you're not going to do anything. So it's really, really nuts that we would even be having that discussion. So that is what you're looking at. You're looking at something that in many ways, regardless of your position on right to life, is just really, really bad policy. And it's doubly bad to put that in a constitution, which you're never going to be able to change as a result of that. And again, these things are permanent, and they override any statutes. So if it says healthcare provider instead of a physician, the legislature can't then turn around and say, well, actually, you have to be board certified, you have to be this. You can't do it. Anyone that has an ability to say they're a healthcare provider would be able to do the abortion, green light an abortion all the way till birth. That's obviously not something that's good. Now, the people that wrote this and are spending tens of millions of dollars, they know all that. They know it. They don't want to talk about any of it because they know a lot of people will recognize that is way, way beyond what even people that are not pro-life would consider reasonable. They know that. So what are they doing? They're basically just spending tens of millions of dollars on ads that are lying about Florida's current protections for human life. And I just don't understand why you would want to tell demonstrable lies, because you will fool some people, there's no question. But as other people start to do their research and see that they're lying to you, that's going to turn off a lot of voters. And so they're really banking on people not learning the truth about what they're saying. So for example, Florida's law is very clear. Florida, you have under what the legislature passed, you have abortions allowed up until the point that a fetal heartbeat is detected, but you also have exceptions for rape, incest, human trafficking, and when the child has a fatal fetal abnormality that will prevent him and her from surviving. And you always have the ability for the life and the health of the mothers. And that's just what means if you're somebody that has taken an oath to do no harm and to care for people, of course you're going to do whatever you can to help the mother. That's the primary patient. It would be ridiculous to have a law that did not provide physicians with the ability to treat people and save lives. And so Florida law is very clear. There is nothing in the law that would ever prevent a physician from performing life-saving treatment on a mother, or even providing treatment with the physical or the health of the mother as defined appropriately in law. That's just a fact. So if you have somebody that is saying that they would be prohibited from providing any type of necessary health care, just understand they are lying to you. And if they're a physician, they are committing medical malpractice if that's how they're conducting themselves. And obviously, physicians have certain responsibilities and duties that they have to discharge. And if they don't, then they can not only be sued for medical malpractice, they can also lose their medical license. And physicians have a responsibility to know what the law is and to know what those duties are. And I don't think any physicians in Florida really don't know what the law is. I think this is political posturing. I think it's passive aggressiveness, trying to say, oh, I'm not going to be able, to help somebody that's had a miscarriage. I mean, are you kidding me? Of course you'd be able to do that. So that's just what the law is, and any insinuation that they've made on that side that somehow, mothers would be held liable regarding abortion is not true in the state of Florida. I don't think it's true anywhere, but it's certainly not true here in the state of Florida. So that's the law. You can look it up. I mean, we have some of the legislators here who crafted that, and I can tell you some of those exceptions. There were people on the pro-life side who didn't necessarily like that. This was a prudential judgment they made about trying to protect life as best that they could, in the current circumstances, and so that's what they did. So everybody's known that. That's been true now for a long time. So what does it say about folks that are arguing that Florida law does all those things that it does not do? That's your whole campaign? Vote for us because we're lying to you about all these things? That is not the way this stuff's supposed to work. But I also think it is a test in the sense that if people can come in, spend $100 million to just brazenly lie and somehow get to change the Constitution, Amendment 4 is just going to be the beginning of what they're going to try to do down the line. This is not a healthy way to conduct our affairs of state. The truth will set you free. Live not by lies. Tell the truth. And I'm happy that we have a lot of physicians who are willing to tell the truth about this. You're going to hear from a number of them right now. It's important to just be honest. And there's we should have honest debates about things. There's anything the legislature does is always up for debate. You can elect new people, you can change on any policy you want. That's what it means to live under a constitutional republic. But to have a blizzard of lies just stand unrebutted is unacceptable. And so you got to tell the truth. We're happy to do what we can do to tell the truth. But I think when you hear from some of the physicians, they're going to tell the truth about what this particular proposed Amendment 4 would mean. And remember, the default should always be on these amendments, no, especially when they're funded by the special interest. Make sure they convince you that this is something that should permanently be a part of the state of Florida forever. And I think most people do not want to strip parents of their rights forever. Most people do not want to displace physicians in favor of any, quote, healthcare provider. And most people think there needs to be some limits on when abortions can take place. And so if you believe that, then it's obvious that you should vote no on Amendment 4. Okay, we're going to hear from some of our folks. So we have Kathy Altman. Dr. Altman, go ahead.
Good morning, and thank you for coming. Governor DeSantis, thank you for what you've done for Florida. My name is Dr. Kathy Altman. I'm a board-certified OBGYN from Orange Park, Florida, with over 35 years of experience. I believed that abortion was a woman's right, so I performed first trimester D&C with suction abortions and also second trimester D&E or dismemberment abortions to help women. If the baby was wanted, I called her a baby. If not, I called her a fetus or embryo. I did abortions during my pregnancy, but after my daughter's birth, I could no longer pull the arms and legs off little babies just because they were unwanted. My opinion also changed as I saw young women in my practice do well after keeping their unplanned pregnancies, as opposed to women who were struggling with the physical and emotional consequences of abortion. Proponents of Amendment 4 keep saying that abortion is safe and effective and that the abortion pill is safer than Viagra or Tylenol. But that's easy to say when only 28 states report abortion complications to the CDC, and 4 states, including California, one of the biggest abortion providers, do not report any abortion data to the CDC. As the lead author on the paper, Deaths and Severe Adverse Events After the Use of Mifepristone as an Abortive Agent from September 2000 to February 2019, I understand the severity of the complications from the abortion pill. We found that the reporting of complications abruptly stopped once the FDA stopped requiring prescribers to report abortion pill complications other than death. Studies from Finland, where meticulous records are kept, report much higher complication rates than those quoted by abortion advocates. They also documented that 38.5% of medication abortions in the second trimester required surgical completion. It's important for you to hear the complications from abortion. They include hemorrhage, infection, sepsis, injury to internal organs, including laceration of the cervix, perforation of the uterus, and injury to the bowel and bladder, uterine rupture, amniotic fluid embolus, pulmonary embolus, coagulopathy, missed ectopic pregnancy, which can result in rupture and death, retained products of conception, ongoing pregnancy, mental health issues, the need for surgery to remove retained products of conception, exploratory surgery to repair damage to internal organs, infertility, hysterectomy to stop hemorrhage, and death. We saw many of these complications in our emergency department, including a patient who came in with her small bowel hanging from her vagina after her uterus was perforated. Most second trimester abortions are performed on healthy women and end the lives of healthy babies. Even third trimester abortionists admit that most abortions in the third trimester are not done for maternal or fetal indications, and none of the abortions I did were for maternal or fetal indications. When the media began claiming that abortion was a necessary part of health care, I polled my partners and found that none of us ever needed to do or refer our patient for an abortion to manage serious pregnancy complications. We may have had to deliver our patient early, and the baby may not have survived, but we knew that was not an abortion because it was not our intent to kill the baby, and we did everything we could to help the baby survive. Florida issued guidance that the current abortion law does not prevent physicians from treating miscarriage, ectopic pregnancy, premature rupture of membranes, and molar pregnancies, and yet pro-amendment forces continue to spread the misinformation that the current law prevents women from getting treatment for those conditions. By failing to define terms such as patient's health and healthcare provider, Amendment 4 will codify the right to abortion for all 9 months for basically any reason on the recommendation of an undefined healthcare provider, not a doctor. It will eliminate all laws protecting women undergoing abortion, including necessary safety regulations and the requirement that abortions be performed by physicians. It will also eliminate parental consent. States with similar amendments have been sued to provide taxpayer-funded abortions. Is this what we want for Florida? No. Those unhappy with our current abortion law need to work with our elected officials to change it. Trying to change our law using this irreversible, extreme constitutional amendment is like using a chainsaw to remove an appendix. The unintended consequences will be catastrophic. Whether you are pro-life or pro-choice, vote no on Amendment 4.
Okay, Dr. Anthony Polgiers.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you for everybody for being here. I am Anthony Polgiers. My wife and I moved here to Jacksonville 30 years ago. We love calling the great state of Florida our home. I am a husband, a father, a grandfather, and a board-certified pediatrician and board-certified pediatric emergency medicine specialist. I have 30 years of experience evaluating and caring for children at a busy pediatric emergency department and pediatric trauma center right here in Jacksonville. I want to shout out real quick to the students that are here. Don't be afraid of talking about this issue at school. Do not be afraid. And young adults as well, with your peers, educate yourselves about our current law, which in my opinion is a really good law. If you're going to have abortion in your state, this is the law you want to have and you don't want to get rid of it. But on the other hand, you need to talk about this. In 1972-73, I was in 5th grade. We debated Roe v. Wade in 5th grade. We were 5th grade students debating Roe v. Wade. So, I mean, I encourage you, bring it up to your teachers, encourage your fellow students to talk about this issue. For some reason, we have a veil that we've kind of placed over abortion, and we need to talk about it. We need to talk about it, and especially when it comes to this amendment. You know, we're going into the home stretch here, and we need to really unveil what this amendment means. So I can tell you from personal experience that every day, thousands of children are evaluated and treated in emergency departments across Florida. Countless more are having life-saving surgical and/or medical procedures. In all of these cases, informed decisions are being made by parents in conjunction with the child's physician as to what is the best course of action in the care of their child. Parental consent is obtained prior to moving forward with any evaluation or care or procedure on a minor. In all of these cases, as a pediatric emergency medicine physician, it is common knowledge that the best possible and safest results from any childhood treatment regimen, medical, surgical procedure is when the parent is fully informed by the physician. And when that parent is actively involved and is fully aware of any and all complications from that procedure or treatment regimen, especially complications. After all, it's the parents who are the ones who will be caring for their child in their home at the conclusion of these procedures. And when you think about it, it just makes sense. I mean, it's just common sense. To do anything else, we call it bad medicine. If Amendment 4 passes, there is one procedure that will no longer have questions from or require input from a parent, no longer require parental informed consent, no longer require a parent to listen to the pros and cons. No longer will a parent be sitting down with the physician prior to proceeding with this procedure to determine what is in the best interest of their minor daughter. That one procedure will be their daughter's abortion. Mark my words, and please listen very carefully. Amendment 4, if passed, will eliminate parental consent for abortions performed on minors. Now let's let that just sink in for 1 minute. No matter what you're hearing or reading in the media, on TV, on radio, on social media, parental consent for abortions on minors will be eliminated if Amendment 4 passes. This is one of many reasons that it is in the best interest of Florida's children, our grandchildren, and all of Florida's women to vote no on Amendment 4. Thank you for your time. As you can tell, I'm a little nervous. I'd rather be like having a patient laying in front of me trying to die, and trying to save them. But thank you for your time and attention. And really, on behalf of those very children I was talking about, thank you for voting no on Amendment 4. Amen.